It's official. MHA managed to stick the landing. And I know we still have a few episodes left for the epilogue, but the main part of the story, the main conflict, is actually finished. And oh boy, what a conclusion this was. I will probably make some videos about MHA, its characters and its themes overall once the final season is over, but for now, let's go through and break down episode 8, Izuku Midoriya Rising. First of all, when you see a character's name and the word Rising in the title, you know it's going to be a great episode. I also love the poetry that we got Rising episodes for both All Might and Midoriya this season, so close to each other. MHA's story as a whole, but especially this season, focused a lot on the passing of the torch, so the title is just a tiny but a very nice touch. But the actual episode starts with everyone entering through the portals and giving Izuku their reassurances. We see a great twist of the iconic line, "I am here," when Mineta says, "We are here." This line and how it differs from All Might's line encapsulates the main idea of this whole story, and I am not even mad it was Mineta of all people who said that. In a way, it's actually fitting. Then we get the opening sequence, and all I want to say is that I feel like it might change one more time for the epilogue episodes. It's not necessary, of course, but it's the final season, so it would be nice if the show went all out. All for One's speech right after the opening was very interesting. He basically said that Izuku's attacks should have destroyed him, but he survived because of his grief for losing Yoichi. It's such an interesting concept, even if the episode only touched it briefly. This season already showed us how empty All for One is. He is obsessed with control and turning everyone and everything into his possessions, because he clearly doesn't have enough within himself, therefore he needs that external validation. His brother was the only one who had at least a little bit of genuine care for All for One, and last episode we saw that once Yoichi was gone, All for One even referred to conquering the whole world as a hollow goal. It felt like he was already dead even before the fight started in this episode. And the fight itself felt like a clash between a man who has nothing to fight for and a group of people who have everything to fight for. All for One lived a pitiful life, and even Izuku himself commented on that, but more on that later. All for One also tried to rationalize everything, and he tried to tell himself how it's tragedy that makes one stronger. While it's not exactly untrue, but a mindset like that won't lead you anywhere good. Here, it was Zero who stepped up to argue with All for One. I loved his speech, even if it's easy to miss when the entire episode was so crazy and so full of many fantastic moments. But basically, Zero spoke about Todoroki and how it's better if miserable things don't happen to you. This entire episode was full of callbacks to earlier seasons, and the way how Zero used his tape to grab Todoroki and Endeavor and pull them away from All for One here mirrored Zero's and Todoroki's fight in Season 2 during the sports festival, when Zero's move was the exact same as here. In general, I love how MHA has many minor background storylines and relationship developments. Look at Zero and Todoroki. Their relationship started on a bitter note, when Todoroki took out his anger on Zero. But throughout the show, we saw small background moments of them making up and becoming friends, and in this episode, that journey is concluded by showing how Zero now has a full understanding and empathy for the things that Todoroki has gone through. One of the reasons why I love MHA so much is precisely because even all the minor characters get some attention and development. But let's move on before I start yapping about every single background character and all their relationships to all the other background characters. We get some fast-paced action where all the heroes fight together before we go back to check up on Izuku. Even if he got his arms back, he's still in a rough shape. I adored the genuine care that Aizawa displayed here. Let's not forget that one of the last things he saw when it comes to his students was Bakugo dying, so of course his heart now also aches seeing Izuku and how hard he had to fight. Izuku also reveals he is transferred one for all, and we get an insanely cool shot of him shielding his ember, which is another callback to earlier seasons. I also loved how Izuku knew the exact brand of the All Might merch shirt that Aizawa gave him. Even in this dire situation, Izuku's still a fanboy, just like he was in the first episode, and it's one of many reasons why he is such a lovable protagonist. After that, we get another callback, and it's Aoyama taking Izuku's hand. It's crazy how Aoyama went from a mostly comedic relief to one of the best characters in the span of just a couple of seasons. We get a shot of everyone cheering in front of a screen, which is yet another callback, this time to Season 3 and All Might's fight. But the most important thing is Aoyama telling Izuku, "Run," which fits just perfectly with You Say Run OST that plays a little later in the episode. Aizawa tells everyone to clear a path for Izuku to get to All for One, which was actually foreshadowed in the first opening of Season 7, so it's a really cool small connection. We see All for One shoot a massive laser beam at Izuku, and he gets saved by Hagakure, which is another, surprise, callback, this time to the traitor reveal episode in Season 7. Another detail I want to highlight is that when we jump to the evacuation center, we see a girl cheering on Shoji, and it's the same girl he saved in the flashback we saw last season. We see some other people, like the old classmates of Mina and Kirishima. I know these are small details, but when you keep adding details like this on top of each other, the episode becomes only better. One of the coolest moments in this part of the episode was the combo attack with Present Mike and Jiro. In Season 2, during the final exam, we saw how their sounds cancelled each other out, and in this episode, they were combined. Also, I didn't mention it yet, but the animation in this moment, as well as this episode as a whole, was consistently great from start to finish. We see as characters keep trying to clear a path for Izuku, and right before we see Gentle, You Say Run starts playing. It was impossible not to cry, knowing this was the last You Say Run we'll ever hear in this show. I feel like this is one of the most iconic soundtracks in any show ever, so it simply had to play during this episode, and it was perfect. I also loved the parallel to the first time it played. It was in episode 2 of Season 1 when Izuku ran to save Bakugo from the sludge villain. Back then, Death Arms shouted that Izuku was going to get killed, but in this episode, he tells him, "You can do it." That's another example of the thing I spoke about earlier, how even the minor characters get their own arcs, their own development. I adored the moment when All for One summarized what this entire story was showing us from the beginning, how Izuku has something that All Might didn't have, the strength of weakness. I spoke about it quite a lot in my reviews for the previous episodes of the season, but basically, this is the main difference between All Might and Izuku despite all their similarities and parallels. All Might was the strongest, but Izuku is the greatest, because while All Might was an unshakable symbol, a singular pillar, Izuku's journey isn't about doing it all alone. It's about how he inspires everyone around him to do their best, just like he always does. It's not just about saving people, it's also about inspiring people to save themselves. During this speech, we see Ida taking Izuku's hand, which is also similar to Season 6, Episode 23, and that episode also had a similar message, by the way, so I count that as another callback. The scene jumps to All Might talking to Star's crew, and All Might mentions total victory, which is a callback to Bakugo's words in Season 5. All Might also says that ever since the day they first met, Izuku was All Might's greatest hero, and it was probably one of the most beautiful moments in the entire show. The punch Izuku delivers during these words parallels his first ever punch during the entrance exam, frame by frame. We also see Izuku's image from the back, and it looks like the shot from Season 5, when All Might was also looking at Izuku and thinking how he doesn't need to look back anymore. We also see Izuku's mom run closer to the screen to cheer on her son, and that running shot was the exact same as the shot of Izuku running in to save Bakugo in Season 1, Episode 2. I also love the difference in her character, how she went from worrying about Izuku to cheering him on, even if that worry will always be there. I loved the shot of showing all one-for-all users one after the other. It was simply animated in a very cool way. I also loved the speech Izuku delivered here. We already knew that one-for-all gets stronger with each new user because it's a stockpiling quirk. All Might had it for 40 years, so it's obvious that the quirk that Izuku inherited was much stronger than the one All Might had. Izuku only had one-for-all for less than 2 years, but it was still stronger than what he received. So it made sense that All for One's body simply couldn't hold that quirk and started falling apart. Of course, All for One still refused to disappear, so he held his body together just like he held the pieces of his mask together back in Season 7. It also reminded me of the moment where he started rewinding after being burnt to a crisp. Even the shot with a single eye looked similar. The moment with Kurogiri Shirokuma was pretty sad. I still think that the main story didn't do this storyline justice, and my attachment to Shirokuma mostly comes from reading Vigilantes, but still, it was pretty sad. I also have to admit that I believe that Bakugo coming back here was an unnecessary moment. I didn't hate it, but Bakugo's fight was so perfect that I believe it should have been his last moment before the epilogue. Him coming back here, at least to me, felt like it added nothing to the story, and Bakugo is my favorite character. But after that, Izuku's line is one of the best in this episode and the series as a whole. He says how he'll never forgive All for One, but that he also isn't some demon lord. He says that All for One is just a lonely man, and honestly, Izuku's ability to see human in absolutely everyone is his real superpower. Even in real life, it's easy to look at bad people and just call them monsters. It's hard to see the humanity in people like that, but Izuku does. He sees a human heart even in the worst of the worst, even in people who could never be forgiven for their actions. Izuku is truly a great protagonist, and I never understood people who called him weak or a crybaby when he is the absolute opposite of those things. I also have to mention how All For One says, "Don't look at me," when in earlier episodes this season he kept repeating how he wanted everyone to look at him and only him. It's the classic case of people showing their true self at the very end. All For One's last scene was great. He begged Yoichi to stay, even told him that he loved him. This scene wasn't meant to make us feel sympathetic for All For One, but I think it was meant to make us pity him and show that he lived a truly empty and pointless life. Even his brother said that it's time to pay the price for his crimes right before it was revealed that Shigaraki and all the One For All vestiges were also awakened and ready to get rid of All For One once and for all. The final punch and how Shigaraki and Izuku worked together was perfect. What else can I even say here? And then we get a final conversation between these two. There's a lot to unpack here. First, Shigaraki/Tenko admits that Izuku was right and deep down he was truly just a crying boy. I think the story made it clear for the viewers a long time ago, and in the previous episode we even saw how Shigaraki accepted Tenko and Tenko accepted Shigaraki. We saw how those two identities finally got reunited in a way. But it was also important to actually hear Shigaraki admit that his need for destruction came from his own pain that he had tried to bury instead of facing it and healing from it. None of that changes the fact that he's dying here and that he'll never get the chance to heal, but that realization still brings some peace and even hope. It's too late for Shigaraki, but people like Izuku exist, so perhaps it's still not too late to save the next person, the next crying boy. I also loved Izuku's speech here. The first thing he said, just like with All For One, is that he'll never forgive Shigaraki. And that's fair. In general, I think MHA handled the topic of forgiveness with a lot of care. Just look at the Todoroki family. But going back to Izuku and Shigaraki, we once again see Izuku reaffirm that Shigaraki is a person, that Izuku fought him because he wanted to stop him, but he also wanted for Shigaraki to stop himself. In other words, Izuku fought to save, even if he can never forgive Shigaraki's actions. And finally, we get to my favorite part of this scene, and it's Shigaraki's last words for Spinner. This relationship is so underrated. If we look at the whole League of Villains, we have Magna and Compress who were removed from the story a bit earlier than the rest. Then we have Dabi who joined for selfish reasons and doesn't seem to care about the League. Then we have Toga and Twice who were like a pair. And finally, we have Shigaraki and Spinner who are like another close pair within the League. Spinner used to be the one who challenged Shigaraki the most. He kept questioning his ideology, and Shigaraki didn't dismiss him. Shigaraki listened and proved himself to Spinner, which turned Spinner into his most loyal supporter and friend. Throughout this final fight, we saw how Spinner kept thinking about Shigaraki, and Shigaraki kept thinking about Spinner. Shigaraki didn't just want to destroy, he also wanted to show this new horizon to Spinner. which, more than anything else, proves Shigaraki's humanity. In his last moments, he didn't think about Toga or Dabi or anyone else. He only thought about Spinner and how he wanted him to know that to the very end, Shigaraki didn't stop trying to achieve their goal, even if he believes he failed. Tomura Shigaraki fought to destroy until the very end. This line is a perfect line for Shigaraki's final message. This line is a perfect line for the main antagonist of this show to have. In my personal opinion, the author handled Shigaraki's send-off very gracefully. I also think it's important to analyze Izuku's response to that. He says that Shigaraki managed to destroy things, but the statement is left pretty vague. My interpretation is that Izuku agrees that Shigaraki did successfully destroy some things. Society will never be the same after the events of this war. People aren't worshipping heroes anymore, not like they used to. We have also seen how everyone is now much more active and tries to contribute however they can. The complacency that Shigaraki spoke about back in Season 2 seems gone. Shigaraki also helped to destroy All For One, who was responsible for his tragic life. And in general, I love how nuanced this situation is. We see the main hero of the story tell the main villain that he succeeded, and that's a bold but a very cool thing for a story to do. Shigaraki was defeated in the end, but it doesn't erase everything he did. There are consequences, and if there's any story that deserves a long epilogue, it's MHA, and a long epilogue is exactly what we are getting. After this whole conversation, we return to the real world and we see how the last punch of Izuku clears the storm. In Season 1, we saw All Might change the weather. We saw how his punch created clouds and rain. And in the final season, it's Izuku who changes the weather with one punch, but this time it's by clearing the clouds. It's literally the most beautiful conclusion possibly. The final nice touch is Izuku's final victory pose. At first, we see his fist in the air and we might think that he's striking the same pose that we saw All Might, Endeavor and Bakugo do. But then it's revealed that Izuku's pose is completely different. He's literally flying in the air with everyone looking up at him, at this beacon of hope, at this greatest hero who earned that title because of the impact he left on others. And that's it. I am sure there must be a ton of things I missed or forgot to discuss, because this episode was stacked with fantastic moments and details. It's no surprise that it currently has a rating of 9.9 on IMDb, finally surpassing the previous highest rated episode, which was All Might's fight in Season 3, and that's also pretty symbolic in my opinion. But that's it for my review of Episode 8. Thank you for listening. Please share your own thoughts in the comments, and if you are interested, you can subscribe and I'll see you next week for the review of Episode 9.